In the heart of ancient Rome, 67 AD, the air hums with the chaos of the Forum, merchants hawking wares, senators debating, and slaves scurrying under the weight of their masters' whims. But today, a chilling sight freezes your blood. Emperor Nero, draped in imperial purple, strides through the crowd, his face alight with manic pride. Beside him, a figure draped in silken finery, glittering with jewels, moves with practiced grace. The crowd parts, whispering in horror, "This is no ordinary empress. This is Sporus, a boy transformed by Nero's cruel hand into a living echo of his dead wife, Poppaea Sabina." The truth is more horrifying than any rumor, a surgical mutilation, a forced identity, a grotesque act of imperial power. This is not just a story of Rome's decadence, it's a descent into the mind of a man who believed he could rewrite reality itself. Nero wasn't always a monster. At 16, when he ascended the throne, Rome buzzed with hope. His early reign sparkled with promise. Tax reductions, lavish public games, and theatrical performances that charmed the masses. He was a boy king, eager to prove himself. But power corrodes, and by 65 AD, Nero's soul was fracturing. Paranoia gnawed at him, every senator a potential traitor, every whisper a plot. His isolation as emperor, untouchable and unchallenged, twisted his mind. Yet nothing broke him more than his obsession with Poppaea Sabina, a woman whose beauty and cunning matched his own ambition. She was no mere consort, she was his muse, his mirror, his everything. Poppaea was no ordinary beauty. Her intelligence rivaled her allure, her political instincts sharp enough to navigate Rome's treacherous court. When Nero first saw her, he was married to Octavia, a dutiful but loveless union. Poppaea was the opposite, vivacious, commanding, a magnet for every eye. Their affair began as scandal but grew into something darker, an all-consuming fixation. Nero's advisors watched in dread as he showered her with treasures, jewels from India, silks from China, bankrupting the treasury to prove his devotion. He divorced Octavia, alienating allies, and married Poppaea in a ceremony of unmatched splendor. But marriage wasn't enough. He isolated her, surrounded her with loyalists, and commissioned countless portraits to gaze upon her even in her absence. This wasn't love, it was possession. Nero's obsession turned suffocating. He stationed guards to monitor her every move, flew into rages if other men glanced her way. Poppaea, aware of the power her beauty granted, played a dangerous game. She wielded influence, securing favors for her family, but her independence, her willingness to challenge Nero, set the stage for tragedy. In 65 AD, during a heated argument, Nero's temper erupted. Some say it was about his chariot races, others, his theatrical obsessions. Pregnant with their second child, Poppaea dared to criticize him. In a blind rage, he struck her. Some accounts claim a single brutal blow, others a sustained attack. She collapsed, bleeding, her life and their unborn child slipping away. Nero's world shattered. The man who commanded legions, who was worshipped as a god, had destroyed the one person he valued above all. He threw himself onto her body, begging her to live, as if his imperial will could defy death. Physicians were summoned, threatened with torture, but it was futile. Poppaea was gone. Nero's grief wasn't just sorrow, it was madness. He refused to burn her body, instead embalming it and placing it in a tomb grander than any emperor's. He declared her divine, spoke to her corpse, and demanded his court pretend she lived. In this broken state, Nero's eyes fell on Sporus, a boy whose face would seal his tragic fate. Sporus was no one special, a freedman, perhaps 14, raised in the imperial palace. Educated for administrative duties, he lived a life of relative privilege for a former slave. But privilege in Nero's court was a gilded cage. Freedmen owed everything to the emperor's whim, their lives dangling on his favor. What caught Nero's eye wasn't Sporus' mind but his face. Ancient sources describe an eerie resemblance to Poppaea, her delicate features, her haunting eyes. To Nero, unhinged by grief, this was no coincidence. It was a chance to reclaim what he'd lost, to defy death itself. Nero's plan was as calculated as it was cruel. He didn't just want Sporus to impersonate Poppaea, he wanted to erase the boy entirely. The emperor summoned Rome's finest physicians and ordered a surgery to make Sporus appear feminine, a procedure so dangerous, so invasive, it could easily kill. In a specially prepared chamber, Sporus was restrained, his screams ignored as crude instruments reshaped his body. The pain was unimaginable, the risk of death ever present. If he survived, he would never be the same, physically, emotionally, or socially. Roman society would never see him as a man again. The surgery was only the beginning. Nero gave Sporus a new name, Sabina, after his dead wife. He was moved to lavish quarters, where seamstresses crafted gowns to conceal his masculine frame. Jewelers adorned him with Poppaea's own gems, each piece a chain linking him to a woman he'd never met. Makeup artists taught him to soften his features with kohl and rouge. Hairdressers styled his locks in aristocratic fashion, using heated tools and hours of labor. Tutors drilled him in feminine gestures, how to walk, sit, speak in higher tones. Every lesson was a chisel, carving away his identity until Sporus was gone, replaced by a living doll. The psychological toll was devastating. Every mirror showed a stranger. Every day demanded a performance of someone else's life. Sporus was no longer a person but a canvas for Nero's delusion. The emperor planned a wedding, a full imperial ceremony to marry this surgically altered boy. Preparations consumed months and fortunes. The ceremony, held in spring 67 AD, was a grotesque spectacle. The palace hall glowed with oil lamps, flowers imported from distant provinces. Musicians played as Nero and Sporus exchanged vows, signed documents, and shared sacred bread. Guests offered gifts, their smiles masking horror. To the uninformed, it was a grand wedding. To those who knew, it was a nightmare made real. Nero treated Sporus as his empress, granting him staff, quarters, and wealth. But this luxury was a prison. Sporus had to play Poppaea in every way, sitting beside Nero at banquets, accompanying him in public, responding to memories that weren't his. Nero called him Sabina, spoke of their shared past, and expected Sporus to maintain the fiction. The boy's survival depended on his performance. A single misstep could mean exile or death. Ancient sources note Sporus' growing skill at this deception, reading Nero's moods with eerie precision. But beneath the facade, he grew withdrawn, his spirit crumbling under the weight of his stolen identity. Life as Nero's empress was a daily tightrope walk for Sporus. Every morning, he woke in rooms adorned with Poppaea's portraits, dressed in her clothes, her jewelry weighing him down like shackles. Servants styled his hair, applied makeup, and coached him to mimic her gestures. At state functions, he sat beside Nero, smiling as the emperor recounted fabricated memories. The court played along, referring to Sporus as Sabina, leaving Poppaea's seat empty at banquets. To suggest otherwise was to risk Nero's wrath. The emperor's delusion had infected the palace, turning it into a theater of madness. Nero's obsession deepened. He showered Sporus with gifts, from golden litters to rare horses, but each was a reminder of his role. Sporus had to anticipate Nero's moods, respond as Poppaea would, and suppress any trace of his former self. Ancient historians describe his melancholy, a silent scream beneath his flawless performance. Yet he had no choice, Nero's love was a death sentence. The emperor's paranoia grew, his rages unpredictable. Sporus lived in constant fear, knowing a single mistake could end his life. In 67 AD, Nero decided to tour Greece, eager to perform in their festivals. Sporus, as empress, accompanied him. Greek dignitaries, accustomed to Rome's power, were baffled by this boy dressed as a woman, presented as Nero's wife. They played along, offering gifts and praise, but their unease was palpable. Nero's behavior grew more erratic, lavish spending, theatrical displays, and a refusal to govern. Back in Rome, discontent simmered. Governors rebelled, the Senate whispered treason, and the Praetorian Guard grew restless. By 68 AD, Nero's empire was crumbling. Rebellions erupted across the provinces. The Senate declared Nero an enemy of the state, and the guard abandoned him. Fleeing Rome with a small retinue, Nero took Sporus, unable to part with his living reminder of Poppaea. They hid in a villa outside the city, Nero oscillating between escape plans and theatrical suicide preparations. As enemies closed in, he chose death, leaving Sporus vulnerable. The boy who had endured years of torment was now a prize for Rome's new power brokers, a symbol of Nero's excess, both valuable and dangerous. Sporus' nightmare continued. Claimed first by Nymphidius Sabinus, then Otho, then Vitellius, he was passed between emperors like a trophy. Each forced him to maintain the role of Sabina, dressed as a woman, called by Poppaea's name. His identity, already erased, was now a political tool. Under Vitellius, the horror peaked. The new emperor planned to use Sporus in the Colosseum, staging a public reenactment of mythological scenes involving violence and humiliation. For Sporus, this was the final degradation, a spectacle of sexual shame before thousands. Faced with this ultimate humiliation, Sporus made a choice that was his alone. In 69 AD, likely no older than 20, he took his own life, probably by poison. It was a tragic yet defiant act, the first time in years he controlled his fate. His death marked the end of a life defined by Nero's cruelty, a life stripped of agency and identity. Ancient historians saw Sporus as a symbol of Rome's decadence, but his story is more than that. It's a testament to human resilience, to the spark of self that survived years of torment. Sporus' life before Nero is a mystery. We know he was a freedman, educated, perhaps hopeful. But from the moment Nero saw Poppaea's face in his, Sporus ceased to exist as a person. He became a canvas for the emperor's grief, a vessel for a dead woman's memory. The surgery, the forced femininity, the wedding, all were designed to erase him. Yet his final act suggests something of the boy he once was endured. By choosing death, Sporus refused further degradation, reclaiming a fragment of his stolen agency. Nero's reign, too, was a study in excess. His early promise, tax reforms, public spectacles, gave way to paranoia and obsession. Poppaea's death was the catalyst, shattering his fragile psyche. His refusal to burn her body, his conversations with her corpse, his transformation of Sporus, all reveal a man unmoored from reality. Absolute power allowed him to bend the world to his delusions, but it couldn't undo his loss. Sporus became the ultimate victim of that power, a boy forced to live as a ghost. The court's complicity is equally chilling. Senators, servants, and physicians enabled Nero's madness, participating in the fiction of Sporus as Sabina. Their silence, born of fear, sustained the horror. Even after Nero's death, Sporus' suffering continued, his identity manipulated by successive rulers. His story exposes the human cost of imperial ambition, the lives crushed beneath the weight of power. It's a reminder that history's grandeur often hides stories of individual pain. Sporus' tragedy resonates across centuries. His erasure, physical, emotional, social, reflects the extremes of control one human can exert over another. Yet his final choice speaks to an enduring spark of defiance. We know little of his dreams, his fears, his hopes before Nero. That loss is part of the tragedy. His story isn't just a curiosity of ancient Rome, it's a warning of what happens when power knows no limits, when love becomes obsession, and when a person becomes a pawn. Sporus' story lingers as a haunting cautionary tale. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Tacitus used it to illustrate Rome's moral decay, but they overlooked the human at its core. Sporus was not just a symbol of decadence but a victim of unimaginable cruelty. His transformation was not a mere eccentricity but a systematic destruction of identity. Every gown, every jewel, every lesson in feminine grace was a shackle, binding him to a role he never chose. His suicide was not weakness but a final grasp at freedom. Nero's obsession with Poppaea drove this tragedy. Her beauty, her intelligence, her defiance captivated him, but his love was toxic. When he killed her, he didn't just destroy his wife, he shattered his own mind. His refusal to let her go led to Sporus' torment, a desperate attempt to rewrite reality. The emperor who could command legions couldn't accept loss, and Sporus paid the price. The surgery, the wedding, the public charade, all were acts of power, not love, revealing the emperor's godlike delusions. The Roman court, too, shares the blame. Fearful of Nero's wrath, they enabled his madness, treating Sporus as Sabina, maintaining the fiction of Poppaea's resurrection. Their compliance normalized the horror, turning a boy's suffering into a state-sanctioned spectacle. Even after Nero's fall, Sporus remained a pawn, passed between emperors, his identity further erased. Vitellius' plan to humiliate him in the Colosseum was the final straw, pushing Sporus to choose death over degradation. This story challenges us to look beyond history's grand narratives. Behind Rome's marble temples and imperial triumphs lie stories like Sporus, individuals crushed by power, their voices silenced. His life, though brief, speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite years of torment, he found a way to reclaim his fate. His death was a tragedy, but also a rebellion, a refusal to be a prop in Rome's theater of cruelty. What makes Sporus' story endure is its universality. It's a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, of obsession masquerading as love, of systems that enable cruelty through silence. We may never know who Sporus was before Nero's gaze fell upon him, but his final act ensures he is remembered, not as Sabina, not as Poppaea, but as a person who, in the face of unimaginable suffering, made a choice. His story, buried in the annals of Rome, demands our compassion, urging us to see the human behind the history.